Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Fred McHugh. I'm the Director of Infrastructure, Cloud, and Automation here at WEI from the Services Branch. Some of you might know me from different projects that we've run for you. With me is one of my senior solution architects, Daniel, who handles our DevOps practice. This is the third part in our series of DevOps for SysOps, which we decided to start hosting to start covering some of the topics that you might be hearing as system administrators when you hear about infrastructure as code, or you hear about some of these processes. Where do you start, right? And we had a lot of people come to us and say, we know we need to be doing this. Where do we begin? So this is the third in our series. Our first one, these are all recorded, so you can watch them if you'd like to. But the first one was on Git, which is sort of the foundation of all these technologies. Goes over the basics, how it works, why you might want to use it, how to use it. The second section was on infrastructure as code. It was more of an introduction to the topic, where we talk in generalities of some of the technologies you might need going off of Git, things like integrated development environments, YAML, and concepts like that, how they talk to Git, how that stuff all works together. Some general things around infrastructure as code. We briefly touch on both Ansible and other formats, PowerShell. Obviously, Ansible is not the only one. So we get into quite a bit of that. Now we're starting to focus a little bit more. So part three is really an introduction to Ansible. Maybe you kind of know what it is. You've heard about it. People talk about it. Maybe you've had meetings like we should be using this, but again, not quite sure where to start. So today the goal is to dig a little bit more into it, kind of explain the platform, what it is, how you can use it today. And Daniel has a couple great examples of what we use it for. We're starting to use Ansible in all our projects, right? We'll talk about this, but how much it simplifies our ability to reproduce stuff that we're doing all the time.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So this is Introduction to Ansible. This is part 3 of our DevOps for SysOps series. So a little bit about me. I got a little bit of a background, kind of touching on a couple of different industries, but really all centered around DevOps, cloud, Kubernetes stuff, and now more and more so AI. If you want to know more about that, just hit me up on LinkedIn. So DevOps is a lot, and I start off all my talks like this because if you go and research DevOps, uh, you might hit a data wall like this you just see tons of logos, tons of different tools where everybody's saying it's the best. Um, and how do you navigate it, right? For those of you who've seen this already 2 times already, this slide, I'm doing this on purpose. Yes, to intimidate you, but also to show that there's a way through it. So don't worry, we're bit by bit, each step in this series, we're going to find out how to navigate the world of DevOps. So part 1 was Git, right? Foundational technology. Part 2 was configuration as code. Now today, part 3, we're expanding on configuration as code. We're using one of those tools called Ansible. So let's go back to this wall. We're going to filter out a bunch of the logos. These are just the logos that Red Hat develops. And you can see that they have a space in just about every category. And if you haven't seen it already, this is where Ansible sits, underneath automation and configuration. So bit by bit, we're starting to pick it apart and find out how to navigate it. So what is Ansible? It's an open source automation tool. It's owned by Red Hat now. There's free and paid versions that you can use. And the why Ansible, right? Why are you going to use it? The key features are you can use it anywhere. People love it because it plays well with Mac, Linux, Windows, and also things that are not operating systems, routers, switches, and a bunch more. One of the reasons it works so well is because it uses SSH by default, so just widely supported protocol. But that's not all it uses. For Windows, you actually can use SSH, but because there's differences between Linux and DOS, they have this Windows remote management protocol that just makes it easier, makes it play nicer with Windows hosts. The other reason why people love it is that it's agentless. So most tools out there, in order to use that tool against your host, you have to install a bit of software first to make the communication happen. But that's not how Ansible works. Ansible uses widely supported protocols like SSH, and so it just shoots that out towards the host. So you don't have to install anything on them. It uses a declarative scripting language called YAML. Declarative meaning that rather than writing code in Python or like C++, where it's just kind of like all logic based, declarative language is closer to describing what you want in English. Idempotent. All right, this is a word that Ansible loves. And what does it mean? It means that you can run the script over and over and over again, and that Ansible's smart enough to know that, oh, I don't have to run this a second time. I've already done it, right? It's already checked the state of the machine, and it knows that packages A, B, and C are already installed. Oh, but package D, we still need to install that one. And Ansible's extensible, meaning uh, you can keep adding stuff onto it beyond its core capabilities. That's why the community loves it. And it's scalable. So yeah, I really can't stress this enough. Ansible is fantastic if you are a small company with just like one IT person, or if you have a big team of IT people. Um, it works good on just 5 machines, five hosts or 500 hosts. Um, it's really just a fantastic tool that hasn't bumped up against a limit yet. So, I want to talk about free versus paid versions. So, the free version, the most basic version out there, is a CLI. So it's good for a single user working on your local laptop, but you're on your own. And this is what it looks like. So, if you're comfortable with the CLI, you can set the colors right, and you can set some other configuration variables to make it look uh, as nice as you can on the CLI. There's also an open source GUI out there called AWX. Now, the open source world, as some of you might know, it's great that it's free and that the code's out there and that you can look at it. But sometimes you're kind of pushing the limits of the Wild West out there. So AWX, for instance, it's a GUI that's been well loved and you can install it and use it. But when I went there today to their GitHub site, looks like they're in a state of maintenance right now. So there's a lot of changes happening. It's maybe not the right choice for an enterprise solution, right? But you can certainly test it out for yourself. Or if you're not worried about bumping into problems and you're fine sort of navigating those issues that come up frequently when using open source tools, then just know that you'll have to do that. But AWX is important because this is what we call an, an upstream project in the open source world. So there's a lot of development that happens there that's then pulled in to enterprise versions. So Red Hat actually has an enterprise version of this GUI that they call Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform. So this is the paid version, right? So uh, what do you get in the paid version? So it's great for teams. Well, actually, AWX is great for teams too, but there's a few other features that make it great for teams that you get in the paid version. So you get the GUI that we talked about. You also get some tools like event-driven Ansible. Okay, so this is an extra set of automation that you can put on top of Ansible core so that you can do things like monitor a web server. And if it goes down, you've already predefined actions to take when that happens, right? So this is sort of like listening, right? You can tell Ansible to listen for certain events and then execute scripts when certain conditions are met. You also get access to Ansible Lightspeed. So this is an AI coding assistant, and um, maybe some of you have gone to one of the AI chatbots out there and said, "Hey, give me a block of code." This is not like that. This is actually while you're working in your IDE, you can point Ansible Lightspeed to uh, to look at like all of GitHub or just look at a smaller subsection of Ansible scripts to give it some really specific context, so that when you're building out sort of repetitive tasks, it can kind of quickly learn, oh, I have an idea of what you're trying to do, and it'll uh, uh, really just it it'll give you a code suggestion almost like autocomplete right on your IDE screen. So yeah, I would say it's like a really advanced version of autocomplete rather than a chatbot. So it's pretty cool. I got to try that out last year, and from what I've heard, it's improved. And it was good. It was good a year ago, and it's probably even better now. Role-based access control comes built in. This is really important when working with teams, right? A lot of times when we're just working by ourselves as engineers or IT people, we write scripts that maybe use a lot of pseudo permissions because, hey, we're in control. We're just trying to get things done. But as soon as you start rolling with other people, you want to make sure that you lock down powerful automations, right? So RBAC is really important to implement. And it's good to have that built in. And of course, you get Red Hat support. So if Ansible Automation Platform is not working like it's supposed to, you got people to call. Um, and then lastly, you get verified, you get access to these verified and validated collections. Um, these are pre-written scripts that uh, that have already been validated and certified. They even get other partners to contribute to it, like AWS has validated collections that you can use. In fact, we're actually going to use one today. Uh, there's other Cisco, Aruba, I think is one of them, right? Very, very, very popular big companies. They contribute to this, right? You can find stuff on GitHub in the open source world, but again, it might not be validated. You might be on your own and might have to deal with the hiccups that come with that. And there's a lot more that I can't get into right now. It's just expansive features. So, the structure of Ansible, what is it all about, right? So, where do we run it? Well, we can run it on the CLI, as I already mentioned. And this is you just sort of call a playbook and you get some output. You can also execute it through the GUI, whether it's AWS or Red Hat Ansible automation platform. So this is a web-based portal that you can host it locally, but if you're running it with a team, you want to host it on a server, so it's in a nice centralized location. And here you're not going to be running CLI commands, right? You're going to be selecting your jobs and then running them, and you can see the status of what ran and was it a success? Was it a failure? Right? And sort of just share it with your whole team, right? So the components of Ansible, what pieces come together to make it work? So YAML, this is the language that you're writing it in. YAML stands for YAML 8 markup language. So HTML, XML uses tags, which really define hierarchies and stuff like that. But it's a lot to look at on a screen. YAML gets rid of all of that, just uses like indentations, tabs. So it's really clean, really easy to use, right? Human readable. Modules. So the way that Ansible works at its most basic function is that it executes modules of code. These are packages of code. It executes them against hosts that you predefine. And it does that over SSH by default or other protocols. It also uses plugins, right? So plugins are something that augments its core functionality. We're going to use one of those today. And then inventories. Inventories, you're absolutely going to want to use them. Technically, you don't need them, and I'll show you how you can kind of get away with not using it. But if you're not leveraging the power of an inventory um, to organize the different groups of hosts that you have, you're really missing out on a lot of functionality of Ansible. Variables, you can assign variables in a variety of ways, and we'll see a few of those methods today. And then lastly, playbooks. So playbooks is really where the action's at. So this is where you orchestrate your configurations. Um, and the really the point of them is that you're going to specify a task list of things to do, uh, and you're gonna specify um, how many machines you want to execute against, right? Where you want these tasks to execute against. But really, what's the goal of the playbook? The goal of the playbook is to try and organize your automation as simple as possible and as clear as possible, so that once you get it just right, you fine-tuned it, and it's just running reliably for a year, or two, or three. Then when you finally take a look at it after like 3 years, it should still make sense to you. That's the goal, right? That's kind of the initial vision of Ansible was simple automation that makes sense years down the road. Uh, so in order to run Ansible, the most basic example of Ansible, you use this Ansible CLI tool, Ansible Playbook, right? You specify the playbook YAML file that you want to execute, and you specify an inventory file. Now, I mentioned briefly that, oh, technically it's not needed. Well, yeah, you could just, instead of specifying an inventory file, you could put an IP address here. Um, but that doesn't scale well, right? So you're going to want to use the inventory files so that you can um, organize your hosts a bit better. I'll show you what that looks like. So in our first example, this is 101. We're just going to add a user to a single host. So starting a project, you just create a folder anywhere, right? So I create my project folder, and I create a file called inventory.yaml, right? This is just an inventory file of our target hosts. It's also written in YAML. So in here, we just have a few lines. First line is our group name. We're going to call this dev for development environment. We're going to list our host. So the host name can be a DNS name. It can be an IP address. And then we can list variables too. These are host variables because they're attached to the host that we specified here. And that's it. That's your inventory file. And I've only specified one host here right now, but hold on. In the next example, I'll show you how we start expanding upon that. In a playbook. So you can have a lot of playbooks. You can have playbooks call other playbooks like sub playbooks. For this one, we're just going to call our master playbook. Um, whatever you whatever playbook you're specifying is that's your main entry point. So what's in here? So at the very top, we have a name, right? This is what we call a play. So you can, in a playbook, you can have a number of different plays, but it's not uncommon to have a playbook that just has one play. And I'll show you why. So a play is just a list of tasks that map to managed nodes. So what are managed nodes? Oh, well, that's our our hosts here. See, we specified our group name, right? Remember dev? That was the group name that we had in our inventory file. We can also specify additional variables here. We could have put this in the inventory file, um, but we can specify variables here. We can also specify variables in their own variable file. And we'll see that later down the road. But where's the real action here, right? We have a play, and then we have tasks. So here we're only, in example one, we just have one task. So we name it add user, and we specify a module, right? So again, Ansible.builtin.shell. This is referencing a packet of code somewhere in core Ansible, right? So it doesn't have to be all written out here in Python or whatever. We just have a short reference to it, nice and simple and clean. But so each task references a module that we can specify arguments with, right? So the task module is sort of the it's the command that we want to execute on a different host. All right, so in order to now run Ansible, now that we have a playbook and an inventory file, it's as simple as this. Just a short Ansible playbook. We specify the playbook we want to run. We pass it an argument of -i to specify an inventory file, and that's it. It'll add a user. Oh, yeah. Should have said, yeah. In our add user example, just to make it clear, I have two different commands here, which is totally fine. The first one just sort of sets up error handling for a Linux machine. And this sudo user add just adds our new user. All right, so example 202, right? So let's kick this up a little bit. Let's make it more complicated. So the next step is we have our playbook file, we have our inventory file. Let's deploy an application. So a simple Flask app. So anyone who doesn't know what a Flask app is, it's like a website that's just written in Python, very, very small, bare bones. And again, we don't have to, this doesn't make us change our shell command to execute Ansible, even though we have this whole new directory full of many more files. We don't need to specify that in Ansible playbook, right? We will specify it though, and how to use it in our playbook.yaml. So let's take a look at our inventory. We still have our dev group. Now we also have a production group, right? Because we're deploying an application. We'll have a dev environment. We'll have a prod environment. We have a list of hosts here, 1, 2, 3, 4, because maybe we have 4 developers that need to test their changes all at the same time. But we only have one production host. And we have variables still, but now that we have multiple hosts under dev, these are group variables, right? So they're specified a little bit differently. You see I have the vars tag there because it's going to apply to everything in the group, not just one single host, like we have it down here in prod. So those are called host variables when they only apply to a single host. All right, in our playbook, it's gotten a lot longer now. It's going to actually span multiple pages. So we're still going to define, or we're still going to specify dev as our group. We could actually specify all, right? We could specify multiple groups or all to say all groups in our inventory file. But if we did that, it would apply this configuration in the playbook across all the hosts in dev and our production host, right? And if we have changes that aren't ready for dev, it could be dangerous to apply those to prod right away, right? So we have options there on the host tag. Next, under tasks, we have multiple tasks now. And you might notice that even though we have multiple tasks here, they're actually using the same module, right? This built-in.dnf. But they have different states. What's that all about? Well, as the name implies, update all packages, right? I could have highlighted this here, name, star. That's just saying update all the packages, right? Star is a wild card. State latest, it wants the latest versions. In the next task, it just wants to install a few new packages, right? So we've specified the packages that we want, Python 3, Python 3 pip, git, and the state is just present. So if they don't exist on the host, it'll install them, right? So if Python and pip are installed, but git isn't, it's only going to install Git. Next, now that we've installed pip, right, we're going to use the pip module to install Flask. And then we're going to grab something from GitHub, right? So there's a Git module too. And for those of you who are familiar with Git, you might notice that these arguments are just like how you would specify it on the command line, right? Git clone repo, give it a destination. And then finally, we're going to start our Flask app. So now that everything's set up on the machine, we can actually run a shell command to execute that Python application. All right. So in our last example, we're going to further expand on this concept and deploy two different environments, dev and production. So there's a bit of upfront work to do this. So we start in our directories. We want to split our inventories completely between a development set and a production set. Now we had those split up as groups before. So why are we doing that? Because now we got something called a dynamic inventory. So the last example of an inventory file you saw that I was specifying IP addresses one by one by one by one by one. And a lot of people do that. But we have to keep in mind that Ansible is prepared to scale to a large degree. So maybe listing IP addresses of 5 hosts is not a big deal. It gets even with 5, it gets really annoying when those IP addresses change. But more so, what about when suddenly you have 500 hosts, okay, and you have to organize those all into different groups? Well, this is how dynamic inventories are going to help us. So we're going to use the Amazon EC2 plugin. This is an Ansible plugin. It's functionality developed for Ansible by AWS. So it's not just something wild pulled off of GitHub. It's got the support of a major company behind it because they want to make sure it works well. And all we have to do is that we're going to set up our groups, right? We're going to specify a production group and we're going to say, hey, look at all of the hosts in regions US East 1 and look for the environment tag, right? And see if it has prod in it. Okay? So it's going to filter through everything it can find and organize those hosts for us. We don't need to specify IP addresses. We don't need to specify anything manually, right? And this is all it is. Pretty small block of code. And if you want to test it out, there's the Ansible inventory CLI command. So you can say -- graph, and it'll show you, oh, I found these 2 hosts, and I created this production group from that. Okay. And then we're also going to specify individual variable files so that we can keep those environments separated. So we have our dev environment and our production environment. So to show you what one of these variable files looks like, it's just a set of key value pairs. Real simple, real easy to read. Okay. Now, in order to specify a variable file, we do have to use this -- extra vars argument. So our command is getting a little bit longer, but not too bad. And we just specify the path to it, obviously. So now the playbook in this example. I apologize, I missed something. We're also going to be leveraging something called a role in this example. So a role is it's a package of tasks. Here we're calling this role deploy Flask app. I want to make sure Let me just try and use my highlighter. Uh, oh well. Ah, shoot. I'll just have to use the pointer. All right, so deploy Flask app is the name of our role, and it's full of task files, right? So again, we have a main YAML file, sort of like a master playbook, and we have a config for dev, we have a config for prod, we have a deploy process YAML, a build container YAML, right? But I'm not going to go into each one of these, but believe me, if I were to put this cram all of this into one playbook, it'd be at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages long. Gets tough to read, gets tough to manage. So we can uh, we can simplify it by packaging individual uh, uh, processes of automation into their own task files. And then if they're all working together on something, we can package all of that into what we call a role. And and this is where we're really starting to leverage reusability. Okay, so in configuration as code, and definitely Ansible, whenever we're writing code, we want to think about how can we not write something twice. We want to be able to reuse it and build a library of code that we can use over and over again. And that's same with our inventories too. We want to make sure that we're building out a library of inventories that we can use over and over again. So in our playbook, we have a lot more code that's going to execute in this example, but in our main playbook, we don't have much to say at all. We've i- in our execution of Ansible, we've specified an environment file, or sorry, a variables file. So we have our environment variable here will be replaced with dev or prod, right? We'll have our Ansible user defined. Um, but we don't have to have a list of plays here. We just specify deploy Flask app. And then all of that code is reused. Who wants to see the live demo? It's always risky, but let's see if we can get this working. Um, I'm going to post some links. So that's our dev site. And then I'm going to post our production site. So you can try going to either one of those right now, but I would say let's start with dev. Um, and feel free to actually please everybody try to hit it at once. Try to break it. I kind of hope it breaks because I want to see if the production environment is going to be more robust, but it's just a simple little Flask app. You can just type your name in, right? So let's try making a change to this. So in here, I could go into the dev index file where dedication meets innovation. Uh, let's see, do I want to change a message here? It says greet here. Why don't I say welcome? Okay. And maybe I don't like that. Let's see, maybe I don't like the color of that background. Yeah, let's do the background. Let's see if we can just shift it a bit darker. So I've made an update here to the index file and the CSS file. So now that I've done that, I have to oh, actually I want to try out this inventory command for you guys just to show you how it looks. So we're using our dynamic inventory, and we can see that it found a couple hosts, and this is the address of our dev host. All right, so I've updated index and CSS, but I have to push them up to GitHub. I'll do that quickly. All done. Now let me run the playbook for just the dev environment. This is what Ansible looks like when it's running. You can see we have a whole bunch of tasks that have run. All right, now let's reload this and see if our changes showed up. Hey, look at that. Well, I don't like those. I don't think that's the right color. All right. Now let's try it for our production site. So for production, let's just wrap it up and just change the tint to blue. And we got to push our changes and we run the inventory command just to check and make sure that our hosts are being found correctly. And we'll execute our playbook. Notice that we are specifying the same playbook, but with a different inventory and a different variable file. There's a bonus Easter egg here, if anybody picks it up. I'll tell you what it is. So the YAML file, you guys might have noticed that I wrote .yml. It is actually .yaml. .yml has been accepted as well. That's just my preference. I use it shorter. It's shorter or whatever, but both work. Both are fine. It's both YAML file though, even though it's a different extension. Okay. Looks like we're all set. And it says that the service is running. All right. We see our changes are different here. All right. In the production environment, the big difference here is that there's something more like a load balancer that's also been installed because remember I mentioned I actually kind of wanted you guys to see if you would break this. Um, Flask apps, um, they theoretically can only handle like one request at a time. So if everybody hit it at the same time, it probably would just break and not give a response to many of the requesters. Um, but using Gunicorn and Nginx on top of that, it should be able to host a website to a much greater extent. All right, so that's it for the live demo. Let's open it up to questions. I'll see if anything comes in the chat, or feel free to turn your microphone on if you want.
One thing I did want to cover, Dan, is just we talked about was where do the tags come from when you in your dynamic inventory?
Oh, yes. Sorry, friends, I forgot to bring that up again. So let me roll back in the slides. So specifically what Fred wants to bring up here is these tags here, right? So these tags are user specified, right? So when I created my EC2 instances, right? Here I am in AWS. I have my dev box and my prod box, right? These tags here on the tags tab, you can specify whatever you want here. Here I have an environment variable called development. But these are not uh, uh, in here by default. There might be some for some resources, there might be some default tags, but really in DevOps, we're in a world where we make a habit of tagging as much as possible, right? It's metadata that we want to just uh, add to any resource that we can. so that uh, so that further down the line when there's a problem, it's easier to find in a hurry. Um, it's also just that idea of you can't manage what you can't measure. So the more tags that you have, the more ability you have to filter through your resources and group them and look for trends and stuff like that. But these tags have to be specified by you, so you choose them.
And it's not just a cloud thing either. It's like VMware does it. Like you can tag stuff in vCenter. It's not something we've done historically, but as you get into automation, anytime you start going down the automation path, even a lot of like monitoring tools, look for um, tagging. So it's something that, if you're not doing it today, it's something to think about. And even doing some of these baseline tagging, because having to go back can be, then it's like, where do we even start, right? And so if you have a infrastructure that's older and it's not cloud based, like what do I do? And really, it's kind of one of those things as you're getting started. We see this all the time as people like, well, I don't have any tags. It's like, right. So how are we going to do that? Like, how are we going to go out and figure this out, right? So
Mhm.
um, that's part of it, architecting and kind of figuring it out. It can be anything. They don't impact the running of it, but it is something to think about. It is something to start putting in, like, oh, I have a new project. Maybe I should tag these as project X, or I should tag it as production. Just throw a couple in there so I know that they are. So that's something you should be thinking about
Mhm.
outside of Ansible. It's there's a lot of good uses for it, and it's something that we
Yeah.
can query inventories, not even in Ansible inventories, but just like how many production systems we have. Well, right now we have 822.
Yeah.
So
In part two, when we talked about configuration as code, I also talked about a subset of configuration as code called infrastructure as code. And there's another technology that a lot of people use in tandem with Ansible called Terraform, right? So in Terraform, you're specifying the creation of infrastructure like VMs sometimes. Um, and in my last talk, I think I had an example where I showed, hey, adding tags one by one by one through this AWS GUI, it can be a lot, right? And especially if you have 500 hosts, the idea of tagging all of them manually is like an awful thought. Not to mention, you're human. We're human. We're going to mess it up. We're going to miss something. We're going to, misspell something. But you can automate tagging with tools like Terraform. You actually can do it with Ansible as well. Ansible, I like to mostly think of it as a configuration as code tool, but you definitely can use it to create infrastructure in AWS. AWS has built out some plugins and collections that make it easy for you to do that. I still think that Terraform's a better tool for that. And maybe it's worth noting that the next talk that we're going to be doing on this, part four, I'm going to be doing on Terraform. So you can best believe that we're going to be talking a lot about tagging in those examples. All right.
yeah, so folks are coming up to 4 minutes left till 1 o'clock. So anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts? Happy to throw it out there.
So noticed that at least for the demo, you had your Ansible configuration code in the same repo as your application code, right? Your web. Is that
Mhm.
how you advise it moving forward, that the configurations and the application code sit in the same repository, or should we be configuring and then later applying, applications on top of it if that's the case?
Uh, yeah, so that was really just to keep it as simple as possible, right? I mean, you can make that reference however you want, right? It doesn't have to all be underneath the same directory, but I'm trying to keep those paths really short for this presentation. So that's why I just put it all together
Okay.
for simplicity's sake. Yeah. At some point, we're going to do something on CI/CD pipelines. And what you'll see happen when you do that and you're running automation and building code, uh, what you'll end up doing is that you'll be pulling down probably two different GitHub repositories, um, and you'll maybe pull them into the same directory, right? Um, or you might move some files around during that automation in order to specifically put them next to each other to make the automation simpler. But that doesn't mean that they're initially packaged together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so they might be built together, but they're packaged separately. Well, as always, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn and talk to your sales rep at WEI. We can explore lots of ideas with you. Whatever uh, uh, idea that you have, right? Don't think that it's you know, not relevant or whatever. We want to try and help make this DevOps journey easy for you. So wherever you're at, right, advanced or just getting started, yeah, I'd love it. I'd love to explore that with you.